Hi, so today's video is going to be how I came to terms with Jaden's additional needs and the kind of grief cycles and that kind of thing that go with it. I think my story is probably quite different to most people's, because all the way back when he was 15, 16 months old, that kind of age, obviously everybody in my life thought I was crazy for even thinking there was anything wrong anyway. But even back then, I knew it was lifelong, and that sounds ridiculous because he was tiny. He was a baby essentially. You know, he crawled at milestones, he was acknowledging his name, things like that, and then there was the regression, and I think the regression is probably the biggest red flag that you can possibly have for autism. And I did have some understanding of autism already, which I guess a lot of people don't at that point. There was no eye contact. He wouldn't acknowledge that you were talking to him. He wasn't obviously talking at all. There were a number of things which to me said autism, and from what little I already knew, then I'd obviously done research and everything else, and to me at that age I knew that it was major. I knew that it was ongoing, whereas most people would just kind of, you know, every child meets their milestones in their own time and all those kind of things. I don't know how, I can't explain it, but at that point I knew this isn't going to be something he's going to grow out of. And I mean, it's only now that his paediatrician really will put in black and white that it's more than speech and language delays, which is crazy because obviously Jade was 20 months old when I first took him to the GP, and at that point I could have diagnosed it myself. Like, if they just said, right, sign on this bit of paper that's, you know, diagnose it yourself, I would have done it, because I knew 100% there was never really any doubt. I mean, from the other point of view, of course you want to be wrong, if that makes sense, but I knew I wasn't. I'd have loved somebody to come along and prove me wrong. Everybody was telling me I was wrong, but if they could actually show me I was wrong, that would have been a different thing. But I just, yeah, I knew, which I think in a lot of ways has probably made the journey easier, because I haven't fought against anybody in that way. I've kind of been very accepting of it from very, very early on. I mean, it still hits me like a ton of bricks sometimes. You know, it'll be the wording in a report, or even a couple of days ago they'd put on Jaden's, because we have like a homeschool diary to show kind of like how he struggled through the day and through the evening, and the teacher had just put in there how much he'd struggled that day, and that he needed a lot more support that day than normal, and it was because they'd moved things around in the classroom, which, yeah, change and autistic children obviously don't go well together. But a stupid little thing like that, just the fact that he's had a tough day, he struggled at school in a way that other children wouldn't, that can still hit hard, because you don't ever want your child to struggle. Obviously we're at a completely different point to a lot of other people that I know with a child of similar age because of Jaden's speech, which, I mean, going back, he's only really been talking for less than 2 years. So that fear of him being nonverbal was huge, from obviously when Ella was first started to talk, so around that age of sort of 14, 16 months, to when he was, or turning 3 really, was when he started to talk. So that fear that you might never get words was just huge. I mean, from 2.5 he'd maybe have like a few words at a time, but he didn't retain, and then it was really like the beginning of 2017, so he was about to turn 2018. God, I have to stop and think where we are then. Yeah, so he was literally turning 3 by the time we had actual speech, or that you could have an actual conversation with him. And even then, a lot of it was kind of copying or echolia and things like that. It wasn't necessarily that you could have a conversation with him at that point. A conversation, I would say, is really kind of like a proper conversation is like the last year. And yeah, it has been a tough journey, but you always have to compare, well, not compare because that's a horrible word, I hate that word, that's not what I mean. You always have to realise that there's somebody with a million times worse problems and that struggle in different ways. And I hate kind of the high functioning labels and all those kind of things, because I don't like to write off how much he does struggle or how much we struggle, but at the same time, yeah, he's in mainstream school and all those kind of things. So from that point of view, like, that is something that at one point obviously I was scared wouldn't happen. So to see that he is relatively, I wouldn't say he's coping in school, but he's to a degree coping in mainstream school is amazing, because it's not something that we thought necessarily would happen. And obviously when he was non-verbal and things like that, you never can really know like how your journey is going to go, or like what their functioning level will be at that point. But yeah, I've always been quite, I don't know whether accepting is even the word, but quite calm about it all in general, because I mean, you can't change it. I know that's a really stupid thing to say, but I think there's so many people that kind of think like if they get to a certain point, or if this happens, that happens, then they'll be able to kind of fix their child. Or there's like all these crazy people in America that like, I don't know, think they can like bleach the child's internals, and I don't know, send for an exorcism. Like there's crazy things that people come up with. But at the end of the day, you have to celebrate the child that you have, not the child that you thought you'd have. And Jaden is amazing. Like you can't even explain, like you can't explain the bond that you have with that child, because I think the bond that you have is like a completely different thing, because they are so dependent on you, that, and they always will be in a different way to a neurotypical child. Ella is like the most independent child you could ever imagine on earth anyway. Whereas Jaden is like attached to me every second of the day. She's, yeah, doing her own thing, not bothered about me in the slightest. So they're so different anyway. I think again that's a huge thing where I would struggle a million times more. Jaden is very like over affectionate, like has to be touching me like every second of the day. If I had a child that wouldn't cuddle or like hated being touched, any of those kind of things, then I'd probably find that a hell of a lot harder. And obviously everybody's journey, like, don't for a second think that I'm judging anyone else's journey or anything like that, but our journey is our journey, and that's all you can kind of take from is your own experiences. So for us at the moment, we're in a fairly kind of even, you know, everything's fairly calm, we're fairly settled in school and all those kind of things. With Jaden, that kind of, all the anxieties, all the sensory things, everything like that kind of calmed down a little bit when he's fairly in like a, how do you explain it? When everything's fairly calm around him, or when he's kind of fairly settled in the situations. But it can only take like one tiny thing and everything be up in the air again. So we never take kind of the good days for granted. It's a case of, at the moment, we're